Hey everyone, in this video, let's understand the basics of Splunk. So before going ahead and learning Splunk, I want to list out what topics that I will be covering in this video. Alright, so these are the topics that I will be going through in this video. First is what is Splunk and what kind of data that Splunk accepts. How does the Splunk architecture look? How is Splunk deployed? What are Splunk apps and what are the default users and roles in Splunk? So let's start with what is Splunk. So Splunk is a platform, or you can also call it as tool used with data. All right. So data is the food for Splunk. As rice, bread is food for us, so data is the food for Splunk. Everything we do in Splunk is related to data, and there are many kinds of data in this world. So what kind of data exactly I'm talking about? So data which is generated by machines. All right. So Splunk accepts machine generated data. So what do we do with that data? So we use this machine generated data to we analyze the data, we visualize the data, then we collect the data. So there's also a concept called indexing. We index the data. Why? Why do we do this? Why do we analyze? Why do we visualize? Why do we collect? And why do we index the data? So that we can create dashboards, alerts, reports, like you can create triggers to find if there is something wrong with your data. You can also check how is the responsiveness, how is the loading times on your apps or websites. So these are all the things that you can do with the machine generated data. If I have to put out the definition of Splunk, it would be Splunk is a platform, specifically data platform, built to collect, index, search, analyze and visualize machine generated data in real time. Alright, now let's also talk about what kind of data does Splunk accept. So Splunk will not accept all kinds of data. On an overview, Splunk will accept any data which is text based. All right, there are different kinds of machines generating different kinds of data types. So I will list out all the data types right now, not all, but the most commonly used. But Splunk is a big tool. It will accept many kinds of data. All right. So the first type of data that we are going to talk about is logs. So most common type of data that you see in Splunk are logs. So where do these logs come from? They come from servers, they come from firewalls, all right, they come from routers, applications. Now that we know that Splunk accepts logs, and this is the most common type of data type that you will see in Splunk, like when you're working with Splunk, then Splunk will also accept data type called metrics. These come from your CPU, memory, disks, etc. And Splunk will also accept events, which come like events are those where the users do on your app or websites. Let's say the login info, the errors that are coming on your websites, the transactions that are happening on your websites, like login attempts. Then you can also say errors or transactions. Okay, now that we know Splunk will accept logs, metrics, and events, Splunk will also accept the data which is in the format of JSON, XML, CSV, Windows event logs. Then it would also accept APIs and more, and many more, but we are just having a generalized discussion on the common types. So Splunk will accept the data which is logs, metrics, events, and also the data files which are in the format of JSON, XML, CSV, Windows, event logs, APIs, and more. And the most beautiful part of Splunk is it is schemaless, which means in SQL, you have to provide a schema for the data before injecting the data into that particular platform. But it's Splunk, you don't have to define the schema before ingesting data. This part is taken care by Splunk, where we save huge amount of time because observing the files, defining the schema takes a lot of time. But Splunk will automatically do this task for us. Okay, this is also one of the most important point that Splunk, like you don't need to define the structure before ingesting the data. All right, now that we have discussed what is Splunk and what kind of data does Splunk handle, let's also see the architecture of Splunk. What do I mean by architecture? Architecture is something how Splunk works from a high level. All right. So Splunk works on a high level using three core components. All right. So we have three core components. We also have additional core components, but I'm not going into them in this video because this video is just about the basics. So the three main core components are forwarders. So these are the three main type of core components that makes working in Splunk possible. So let's discuss each one of them in detail. All right. So what are forwarders? All right. So as I said, Splunk is a platform, right? So you have to bring the data from an external source, which is machine, into the Splunk. So the forwarder takes care of this part. So forwarder is responsible for collecting and sending the data to Splunk. Where exactly in Splunk? Where does this data go in Splunk? It goes to indexers. All right. So forwarders are responsible for collecting and sending the data to indexers. So these forwarders are very lightweight agents. All right. What do I mean by lightweight? What I mean is that they do not consume heavy resources on the machine that you're deploying it on. Like there are so many forwarders in other apps, like not in Splunk but the alternatives of Splunk, where the forwarders, like the tool which will collect and send the data to the platform, consume heavy resources on the machine. But in Splunk, these forwarders are very lightweight, which means they do not consume heavy energy and memory. Then we have two types of forwarders. All right. So we have two types of forwarders. One is universal forwarder. The other one is heavy forwarder. So why do we have two types of forwarders? Let's say let's say you have small amount of data and you just want to move this data into Splunk. Then you use universal forwarder, which is very famous. Like, and let's also take a scenario where you have large amount of data, you need to filter and parse the data before sending it. Then you use heavy forwarder. So you use universal forwarder to send raw data. You use heavy forwarder when you want to parse or filter the data you want to send. All right. So we talked about what is forwarder. It is responsible for collecting and sending the data to indexers, and these are lightweight and these are of two types, universal and heavy. Universal sends raw data and heavy can parse or filter the data before sending it. Now let's talk about the beautiful part of Splunk. It's like the heart of Splunk, which makes working with Splunk possible. Central component of Splunk. All right, so this is one of the central component of Splunk. So it's like the heart of Splunk. We can just say that it's like the heart of Splunk. So what does this do? So it will parse the data, which means it breaks down the data. It will index the data, okay, and it will also store the data. So whenever the data comes into Splunk, it directly goes towards the indexer. So what does the indexer do? Indexer will break down the data into things called as events. All right. So these are events. So how exactly does indexer break the data into events? So it will break the data into events based on timestamps. All right. So let's take an example and understand how this works. Let's say you have a log file which is coming into Splunk. Okay. So now it directly goes towards the indexer, and in this log file every description is divided by line breaks. So this is first description, second description, and third description, and every description has a time. For example, 1:31 p.m. 59 seconds, 1:32 p.m. 00 seconds, 1:40 p.m. 02 seconds. So Splunk will look at the line breaks, observe the timestamps, and breaks these into separate events based on the timestamps. All right. So this is about the breakdown. Then Splunk indexes, which means it extracts some kind of information from these events. To keep it simple, I'll just tell you that Splunk will extract metadata like host, source, and source type. So we are not talking in detail about these three types because this is separate discussion. What are these? Just know that host is the name of the system, like name of the machine or the name of the device, name of the forwarder, where the event or the log generated from. Then what is source? Source is the origin or file path of the data. And what is source type? Source type is the structure of the data. So after the indexer parses and indexes the data, it will store the data in kind of special databases, called index. For now, just think that it is index, but it works differently. That is a separate discussion. So Splunk indexer stores the data in index. Why does it store the data in the index? So that we can use the search head, which is here. We can use the search head and search the data and create reports, dashboards, and visualizations from it. Let's also talk about the third part, which is search head. So what is search head? Search head simply means it's a part of Splunk where we write our searches and create different kinds of things that we want. So it is a UI basically in a Splunk app. So what does it do? It will execute searches and also create reports and dashboards. All right. So it will execute the search that we write. It will create reports based on that and dashboards based on that. Also, um, mostly mostly we don't do heavy stuff with forwarders and indexers. Those are kind of automated, but we majorly deal with the search head. So this search head is used by analysts, developers, SOC analysts, etc. So these are the core components and how they work. So I also want to show you the visual flow of how these core components support each other and makes the searching possible. So here lies the forwarder. So this goes to the indexer. Right, let's all right, and from like after the data is stored in the indexer, we use the search head to create visualizations, reports and dashboards. So this is the visual flow. Now let's talk about how is Splunk deployed. So what are the various kinds of ways that you can use Splunk? Splunk is mainly deployed in two ways. One is enterprise and the other one is cloud. So enterprise means the components and the infrastructure is installed on premises. All right. So components or infra is installed on premises. So the organization or the company where the components or infrastructure is installed is responsible for the working part and for maintaining the components. But what is cloud? Splunk Splunk is responsible for installing the infrastructure on the cloud and for everything. So you don't have to do anything on the infrastructure part. No infrastructure is required, and you just access the cloud and do whatever you want. So where are these useful? So you will use infrastructure if you have a large organization and if you want to keep things private, and you will use cloud if you want if you don't want the headache of installing everything on premises, if you don't want to take care of the part where something goes wrong and you have to jiggle around fixing that stuff, you just use the cloud. And there are different kinds of pricings for both. So also there used to be another thing called as Splunk Lite, which is discontinued now. All right. So which is now discontinued. It is for the small organizations where there are less than 10 users or 15 users, small IT companies. So they just thought they implemented the Splunk Lite into Splunk Enterprise, and you also have many different kinds of deployment types in each of it. I'll make another video of it, but just for now, just know that Splunk comes in two types: enterprise and cloud. Enterprise means installing components on premises. Cloud means like everything is taken care by Splunk, and you just open the cloud Splunk cloud and do whatever you want. Also, let's discuss about Splunk apps. So there are thousands of Splunk apps available online. Okay, I'll write thousands. So there are thousands of Splunk apps available online, like um, Microsoft 365 for Microsoft 365, AWS app. So these provide integrations with that app and let you take the data and visualize it. You also have thousands of add-ons. For you use these for data input and normalization. Yeah, so you can, if you want to have a look, you can go to splunkbase.com and look at the apps that Splunk supports and look at the add-ons that Splunk have. So if you want customized dashboards, customized visualizations, if you're working with third-party services, you use apps. So this is not much discussion to do now, because this depends on the use case that you're using the app for. I'll make a separate video on what kind of apps are popular, what are the most commonly used apps and all. But for now, apps are those which will solve a specific problem for you, and these are all available at splunkbase.com. And you also have add-ons. Okay, now let's talk about users and roles. Or both are same. You can just think of either roles or users. There are three types of default roles in Splunk. One is admin, second one is power, and the third role is user. So admin is the most powerful, the second most powerful is power, and the least powerful is the user. So whatever the access that admin gives to the user, the user can only access those enabled features or those apps in the Splunk. So admin can control everything that the user or power user can do. And one more important point that you have to know that is that Splunk admin can create additional roles. So the Splunk admin can create additional roles and assign them to different kinds of people in their organization. I think I have covered all the points. Let me go back and yeah. So we have talked about what is Splunk. We have talked about what kind of Splunk does what kind of data does Splunk handle. We have talked about the architecture, like the high level architecture core components. We have talked about how is Splunk deployed enterprise and cloud. We have talked about Splunk apps, and also we have talked about the default roles in Splunk. Alright, so that is it for this video. I'll be coming with more information in other videos breaking down every single part of Splunk. I'm taking down things slowly, moving things slowly. Expect videos from me in a slow manner. I'm not rushing things down. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next video. If you liked my content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you.